firstly, congratulations. You have been traveling across India. This was the opening film for the European Union Film Festival. Then it was screened in Kolkata also. So, could you also tell us a little about the experience of coming to India for this festival and the different places that you have been traveling, and what has been the overall feedback like?
So, hello. This was a surreal big screen home screening experience. And we're really glad to we've been really happy to show the movie on the other side of the world, because with this film we toured all of Italy and Europe, and we were able to also screen it in the United States. But actually this week was I think the first time we were able to present it in Asia in general, because of the pandemic and stuff. When it did screen in other countries, we weren't able to go, and so this was a first to us. And it was also an interesting test, because when you make a movie and there's some comedy in it, you're never really sure if the jokes are going to come across. But it was amazing to see at the European Union Film Festival that night that people laugh at every joke and every cue of the actors and understanding. And that really made us feel good about our film, but about filmmaking in general, how, it can really be a universal language, and you laugh of something, even if it's a joke. Like, there's jokes that every time we know the joke is about to come and we're like, okay, this is not gonna be funny. But it is, and it's really incredible.
Yeah, also being here for the first time in my life in India is great. Like, and being able to bring the movie here and show it to a really, deep and amazing culture is really an honor. So it's been great to travel, to Delhi and Kolkata. So thank you so much.
So, the two of you have basically been born in Monaco, if I'm not wrong, and then you have grown up in Italy and mixed childhood, often visiting Tokyo also, and Milan also, I think, if I'm not wrong. And you did your filmmaking in the US and then came back to Italy and made your first film. And also the fact that you grew up around this film festival in Torino, which was, a very happening place for you during your childhood days. And when your film was first screened, it was again screened at that festival. So what was the vibes like, and what was it like? How important was it for you to come back to that place with your first film?
Well, it was incredibly important for us because, as you were saying, we grew up a bit all around. We had the lack of growing up all around, and it's interesting because this specific, the embassy world is where you meet people that have similar experience, because like they travel for 5 years in one place and then 5 years in another place, and we actually can connect to that really well because we, as you were saying, we grew up in Torino, then we moved to Tokyo, then we studied in the US, and that probably gives it's a great luck to have that opportunity, because it can show you, how different and how similar human beings can be, despite what what generally societies tell us on paper. And it's a much rather deep and complicated experience when you live through it yourself, And speaking of Torino, yes, we actually grew up. Torino is our parents come from Torino. So growing up, the Torino Film Festival has always been something to look up to a lot, and we would that's the place where we fell in love with cinema, and we decided to make movies. And so we would sneak into theaters when we weren't allowed because we were too small during the festival, and that inspired us a lot to learn, to decide to be filmmakers. And so when the movie was premiered it was accepted at the Torino Film Festival, for us it was really a dream, And from there it traveled the world, and now we're here, and it's also surreal and incredible.
Yeah, one of the best, like one of the best memories that we have is that in Torino, every time, in festivals, usually when a movie starts, they play the intro, right? The song of the festival with the the design and the music. And Torino always had, now it changed, but it always had this beautiful intro with the song. And when our movie played and that song, started the movie, was really one of the most emotional moments for sure.
And the two of you are separated by 3 years. You are 3 years older to him. And so I'm sure your childhood would have been quite similar, though you were like a little older, but the kind of adventures, the kind of mischiefs, would have been quite similar. Or were you like to bully around? What was it like when you were, growing up in Torino?
So
I think you can be the more honest of the two, being the younger one.
now the cool thing about us is that we are four brothers actually. So he's the first, I'm the second. We have two younger brothers, and one of them is James. And that's always been for sure something that helped us a lot growing up because we had the luck of having parents too that made us stick together a lot between brothers. And since we were kids, me and Orso were like, we wanted to be musicians. And so like we started playing very young and we basically made a band together. And so that kind of collaboration of, talking to each other about the influences, the music, the movies, and keep growing the same kind of, sense of humor and sensitivity to certain stuff, definitely it's what makes possible to make movies together in a way. Because if you think about it, most of the people that direct movies together are brothers, and that's probably because to direct a movie you really need to share so much, like in the mentality and in what you see and what you think, and that's for sure what made us possible to work together. The fact that we grew with so much, as you were saying, similarities, and the cool thing is also like when the differences, and the fights that we have and what we don't agree on, but all those kind of things make us grow as well, because if we were all agreeing all the time, obviously it wouldn't help, but the fact that we're also different makes it even better because it kind of accelerates a lot the work process, because maybe if you're alone you think you have an idea and it's like, oh, this is the best idea ever, and you get stuck on it for a long time until you start realizing the flaws, but being together helps you like accelerate that process a lot.
Especially because when you grow up together, like the other brother is really one of the toughest judges, because imagine when you write together as well, and like he knows you so well that all the jokes you make are boring, right? So if one joke makes him laugh, then it means that it can make the whole world laugh, maybe, but but going back to the so yeah, probably the growing up in such a chaotic schedule, like keep moving around and living 3 years here and 3 years there and stuff. I think as brothers we developed this strong bond because we were the only constant, right? And I see a lot of expats in the room as well. I think that's what happens with expats. It's you develop your own small group of people, because it's also because you are the outsider and you're exploring the world from outside, and so you need somebody to share it with you, so that you can connect with also the things that local people might not understand about you, and that's been a constant, I think, and the great part about it is that I think we, throughout the years, developed the sense of humor, as he was saying. And I was thinking about it the other day. I think a lot of our sense of humor was developed. We lived in Japan for a few years, for our elementary school years, which is one of the moments where you develop probably your sense of humor. And I think much of our sense of humor came from watching American cartoons dubbed in Japanese. But apart from that, I think this idea of a family even if it's not your actual family, but it's a family you create among expats or among friends or among people that can understand you in a certain situation where you feel out of place. I think this movie is a lot about that. Um, I think for this movie, the premise was, our idea was to have three characters that are very lonely, each one of them for their own reasons, and they all have their issues. And they all have issues with their own families, actually. Don, the American character, has issues with his family, and we can tell that, and he kind of escaped from his background. And then we have Elvis, who has a more practical problem with his family because he can't be with them, although he would like to. So the exact opposite as Don. And then we have these two dysfunctional brothers who barely speak with each other, barely know each other as well in the beginning of the movie. In the beginning of the movie, this little brother is being rejected by all the older brothers, and he finds himself like that. And the idea of taking these four dysfunctional characters from a social point of view and have them create their own family where they choose the family members they want to be with, which is this four people commune that they kind of create throughout the movie. It was very important to us because it's obviously we had the lack of having people we can connect with in our own family, but that's not a given, and we feel that like that can happen even with the family you choose, you know.
Italian cinema has such a rich legacy. As somebody like me who grew up, watching the masters of Italian cinema, starting with Roberto Rossellini, then Vittorio De Sica came in, and then gradually with Fellini, Visconti, Pasolini, later on Bernardo Bartolucci, and then in the near 90s we had somebody like a Tornatore, and now somebody like Paolo Sorrentino. But over the last 5 years, thanks to my affiliation with the Italian Culture Center, and especially with the kind of vision that Dr. Baldi has shown, I've met some amazing young Italian filmmakers, which has really introduced me to the new Italian wave of cinema. And you are, of course, the latest addition to my cinema grammar, and it's been really, an enlightening one, because I'm now getting to see some amazing new kind of cinema coming from Italy. So how do you see this new wave as somebody who have actually grown, through it, and now you yourself are putting your work right in front of the audiences?
So the funny thing is that while we were growing up, we had the myth of, the new Hollywood movies, the French cinema, the Nouvelle Vague, and so like we were kind of not allergic, but we were, drifting apart from the Italian cinema because we had that, all the American movies and, the international French movies like that inspired us a lot. So we went to study in the US, and paradoxically, that's actually when the nostalgia and melancholic feeling of, homesickness hit us really hard, and we started realizing, how much we missed Italy. And paradoxically, the years of the US were the ones where we started actually like falling in love with Italian cinema more and more. And we, digged into a lot of the 70s movies, the Commedia all'Italiana, like Scola. We basically discovered him during our university years, and one of the soundtrack music is actually from one of his movies. So during those years, we started, developing this affection and love for Italian cinema, and that's also one of the other things that pushed us to come back and try to make it in Italy. Even though, everybody was telling us, like, oh, you're in the States, right? Why don't you stay there? It makes so much more sense. But it was like a challenge for us to try to come back. And talking about the new wave, we had the amazing luck to. Basically, one of the producers of the movie was friends with this editor, Aline Hervé, which is a French editor, and we met her in Rome, and she read the script and decided to edit the movie. And we edited it in this studio, which was Pietro Marcello Studios, because at the same time she was editing Martin Eden, which is his, movie. And so we, by coincidence almost, started gravitating around his world and meeting him, and he's for sure one of our most the director that we love the most of the new wave of Italian. I mean, he's not that young because he started doing documentaries, but he's pretty young and he's doing these new different type of movies also in the industry in Italy, because he uses a lot of archives. He experiments with film a lot, and she shoots in a really independent way. And so for sure he's one of the most influences, the biggest influences that we are feeling lately in the Italian new cinema.
Orso, would you like to add something to this?
No, I completely agree. I think he is really somebody we look up to in terms of filmmaking, and also the way he uses different media. He uses a lot of archives in films, and we really love Pietro Marcello's work. If you need to discover some Italian filmmakers, please look up Pietro Marcello, because he's really great.
So hopefully we can have a retrospective on him also
Absolutely.
sometime soon. We just had the Pasolini retrospective, and last year we had the Federico Fellini retrospective. I want to come to music. You mentioned music, and you mentioned the 70s, and we all, were enjoying the musical pieces. What was the idea behind using this kind of music, and how challenging was it to get the rights for these pieces?
So when we did the first cut, we put all music we liked, and it was very challenging to get the rights. That's why we decided to compose most of the music ourselves, because as Peter was saying, we started as musicians, so we also really like music, and so much of the music from the film, apart from Mozart, of course, and two other, like the final song and the one we stole from Scola. The rest we composed it or contributed to composing it. And by the style that we decided to use, we actually decided to have also this sort of tropical sounds as well, as long as the 70s sounds. And I think that's because we wanted to, again, we grew up, as Peter was saying before the screening, we grew up spending a lot of time in these places, Ventimiglia, Menton, on the border. And of course, when you look at these places now, but even if you looked at them earlier, they don't look as beautiful or as colored or as tropical. But growing up as a kid, you tend to see everything more colorful and more, and the characters that you see are super interesting, these old guys at the tennis club, and then maybe you see them now and you're like, okay, it's always the same for 20 years, same. But we really wanted to convey this feeling we had for these places, these enhanced colors that we see when we think of these places, not when we actually see them, because now we can tell the difference. But in our heads, these places have always have a magical fairy tale look to them in our memories, because that's what you experience growing up, right? So I think we wanted to convey that on screen. And so that's why we worked with enhancing the colors. We decided to set it in a time that doesn't really have a time frame specifically. I mean, you have modern cars, modern phones, but you also have old cars and old phones. So that when you come out of the screen, you can't like tell, oh yeah, that was a movie set in 2022 or in 1990. It's like confused. Because also in our heads, these places are a mashup of different periods when we were kids, but also now. That's why using our little brother, who's the age we were at that time, but nowadays was the perfect combination for us, because we could, through his eyes, experience what these places mean in our past. And so the tropical music was one of the elements that we decided to put there to enhance this fairy tale look that these places may not have for everybody when they look at them, if they're not emotionally attached to them.
Peter, I particularly like the way you use zoom feature, and it's very dynamic. and it's also, you know, quite similar to some of the new wave films, you know, from the 60s and 70s. And also, you have also, you know, taken it to a more, what should I say, refined level when you do it. So what is the reason behind using, sometimes you're zooming out also, but very vibrant and very cleverly. So what is it that you're trying to do using this?
So I think there's many reasons why we use the zoom, and first of all, we love the zoom, especially because again, you know, in the 70s movies in Italian cinema, they used it a lot, you know, and it was actually an instrument to just suddenly get into the intimate, you know, feeling of a character right away. Then another reason is, you know, that nowadays people, young people especially, are really used to the zoom in a different way because of Instagram and the way, you know, with the reels, and when you like when you shoot little movies. And we realized, like, this summer we worked with a group of little kids, and they're so like instinctively, you know, like attached to this kind of aesthetics and this kind of tricks, like visual tricks of using the zoom and with the phone, you know, going right away into a someone's like emotion to capture it like from far away, and this kind of different things. So, you know, it's a combination of our fetish for the zoom and also the way sometimes, like, especially when we were kids, we liked a lot Wes Anderson movies, and sometimes the way he used the zoom as well, you know, there was really something we always like loved. So the 70s Italian films, you know, and the new way of that kind of communication system definitely was part of the reason why we use the zoom. Also, this movie was made really, basically we decided to take the spirit that we had while doing the short films and try to make a feature. So we basically put together a team of friends and family, and it was, you know, we were basically less than 20 people doing it. The crew was really small. That's why, like, in the end, we decided to put a single page to fit them all in. And so we were really light. We didn't have much, like, you know, equipment, and the zoom helps a lot in that situations, you know, because
Sure, it does, and you have used it beautifully. I must come to, you know, one important thing that I noticed, because my biggest criticism of the Hollywood films is how they portray, you know, people who are not from America. And it's also true sometimes of the Europeans, you know, when they portray the Americans, they portray Americans as this, you know, one-dimensional cardboard characters. But in your case, it looks, you know, in the beginning that this is going to be another cardboard character. But suddenly, you know, you play with our expectations and you give us this whole fleshed out figure who has a certain emotional side to it. And it's not the usual Yankee depiction. So how did this come into, you know, being?
yeah, that's one of the best things about, I think, the way Manuel, who plays Don, was able to do, because it's so funny when we were editing the movie and we showed it to a friend for the first time that she didn't know anything about it, and at like the first 20 minutes she thought it was going to be a horror of a creep American guy that, you know, like stares and stalks women. It's like, what the hell is this guy doing? And then the fact that then after you grow fond of him, you know, and start actually knowing, that's for sure. Like, most of the reason, I think, is for sure because of him. Like, he's really like a good friend of ours, and he has that kind of creep vibe at the beginning, for sure. Like when you first meet him, but then, you know, you keep like talking and meeting, and you discover so much, and, you know, that and the way he is and the sweetness of his way of being. So we definitely with him try to, you know, take on the screen a lot of his actual personality, and that's why also while we were writing it, we used a lot of his also personal life, because he's actually a former tennis player that decided to abandon to try to become an actor. We changed it to a painter, but like he was really, he had that kind of background, and so we together with him we worked a lot on the character to actually, you know, bring on the screen that cringe American side on one end, but at the same time he's really, you know, actual deep personality. And also a funny thing is that he actually doesn't speak a word of Italian. And so, like at the beginning, we called him and we proposed him, like, "Do you want to do this movie?" But and he was like, "How the hell am I gonna do it?" Because so basically, he learned by heart all the Italian lines. He obviously knew the meaning of it, but he was basically, memorizing like a crazy guy and he did an amazing job because obviously it's super hard to like, memorize a language that you don't know anything about. Obviously, we flew him in Italy like a few months before shooting, so he could, like get his ear used to the language and stuff. But he would wake up with panic attacks in the first weeks, like saying, "How the hell am I gonna remember these lines and stuff like that?" But then yeah, because he has a lot of monologues
And
as well.
also a lot of strong non-verbal movements
Yeah.
wherein he's not really speaking anything, but the emotion does get
So
delivered.
he did really a great job.
So, what's next also, on your agenda after this one?
Well, we have a flight to catch in about 4 hours. And next, coming up very shortly, is it's a project we did. Peter was speaking about it with a lot of kids. This year, we did a shoot at a summer camp with the collaboration with the Milano Cineteque. And it was great because we had the chance to working and improvising with 75 kids. We love also like working with young actors is great because sometimes they even for this film we had 3 professional actors and then our brother who never acted before, like we forced him into a theater class like 3 months before just to get used to that thing, but he never acted before. We had a feeling that he could do it also with our help and our slaps. No, I'm kidding. And 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 sometimes, even if he was surrounded by actors with much more experience than him, he would just, train everybody because maybe sometimes even the most experienced actors were a bit in doubt, and so. But his enthusiasm and he's like, let's just do it. Let's just try this thing. Like sometimes driven also the other actors. And so, as I was saying, no, I was saying that. So we did this. It's a medium length documentary, mockumentary, surreal thing that is we're gonna present in Italy right now. But the main thing is that we're working on our first feature, which is gonna be our next, yes, our second feature, which we really hope to shoot in next year, this coming year. And speaking of family and the family you choose, we have Himanshu Dubey here, who's our dear brother from India, and he will be the director of photography on that film. So it's hopefully it's gonna happen in the next year.
I love your passion. The next one is always should be like the first one because that really keeps the zest alive. It keeps the youthfulness alive. Now I would like to open the round for the questions. We would be happy to take. I think we can take 3-4 questions.
Actually, I have a question. You grow in Tokyo. So do you like the Japanese anime?
Yes, so actually, I'm a big fan of One Piece.
One Piece, exactly.
Yes, like
I also watch One Piece.
when we were when we were kids, like we would read and see the anime. And during the lockdown, I decided to rewatch it all again. So for sure, that kind of sense of humor and the way they talk and the way they tell stories in Japanese, surreal comedic moments is for sure part. As Orso was saying, part of our, part of our cultural background in a big way. So growing up in Tokyo and spending 4 years of the heart of our childhood there, it's definitely shaped us mind in a distorted way.
The manga is way more awesome. Thank you.
Any more anime lovers here?
As
Can
you-
we quickly? Okay, yeah, please.
As you told that you both are brothers,
So how did you come up with decision making that you both want to become a director? Like I have my elder brother, we when it comes to having the same leader, we don't agree on that. And you came up with decision making that you want to become director, and so far you came so far way long. You came up with your film, which is rated 6.5 IMDb rating, which you can see, and it was good. So how did you came? So from the from the decision making, I was asking. Mainly, it was decision making that you both decided the same thing. Uh,
I think it's because again we grew up um, sharing a lot of things, and so when we came to the idea of starting to develop our own dreams, we started probably sharing that as well in a way. We started because we have again similar tastes and similar way of being, although we're very different as well. And so we started, and we also make the other one enthusiast about something, right? So like if he likes a song, I listen to it, I like it a lot, and then we talk about the same song for like days, and then he finds another song, okay, and then again. And so when we started playing music, playing music was a great probably background because when you play music, it's always better to be more than one, you know? So if you play the bass, but you're just playing the bass, it's so boring. But then if you have the drums as well, then it can start becoming, you know. So you need actually to collaborate as musicians creatively. And so we started like that, developing each other's drive for music and the arts in general. And so when we came to filmmaking, which is usually maybe a more loner kind of experience, we had that connection, and so it was easier to translate that into movies, and it came very natural to us. Like even on set, we would, having written the movie together and having being on the same page, because when we got to shoot, we were on the same page on everything, because all the fighting we had already done it in the writing process. So at that point we settled. And so our visions was very similar. If anybody from the crew would ask me or him a question, I would have no problem with that. You know, like I would just trust him completely, and I think it's the other way around as well. So that helps a lot. Yeah.
At the back, then I'll come to you.
Buonasera, adesso la gente hanno una capacità piccolissimo, quasi non esiste. Allora, come loro, voi cambiate vostro stile? Basically, people have negligible attention span nowadays. So, from the economics of a
No,
film standpoint,
your Italian is great. It was just a challenging question. So we were. So yeah, I mean that's a very it's a big problem that all filmmakers have nowadays to face with, because people's attention span is falling down, and even our own attention span is like, because you have so much information all the time that again it's normal to watch movies but while you're cooking or you're doing something else. And I don't know if there's an answer to that, making movies that are so great that people just keep watching, or making 30-second movies in the future. I don't know. That might work as well.
And I think something that helps for sure, for our point of view, maybe is the idea of mixing genres and try to touch on different things in the same movie. So we love comedies, but they have dramatic aspects on them, or dramas that have really funny aspects on them, and that kind of the shifting of that probably is a tool that can help manage people to stay a little bit more attached to the thing. But but it's always, you know, a fight also with the producers and stuff like that. Oh, this is not enough because today, or the duration of the film, or all those kind of things that kind of go away from the artistic outcome, but they're, you know, inevitable to face. So I think it's an endless discussion and way of approaching filmmaking that we need to keep thinking about and challenge ourselves to. Like, for example, this project that we did this summer with the kids is probably an example of that, because we tried to, you know, make it really dynamic and really crazy, and mixing dreams with reality, and you know, improvisation with sketches and stuff like that, to try to face that and challenge that. So that was really funny and a lot of fun. At the same time, with, you know, concentrating only on the idea of keeping the, you know, the audience like attached and driving away from what you're actually trying to say or trying to convey. It's also a flaw in nowadays filmmaking sometimes for us. So it's a really interesting, you know, topic to talk about.
Mike in the front here.
I would love to hear you guys talk about the thought process behind the ending we just saw. We see Elvis get in the trunk, and a lot of emotion and anticipation has basically been built up by then. But the final crescendo sort of comes through the perspective of the, you know, child getting out of the train, and brings all the emotions to a very sweet resolution by the end. So we'd just like to know, was the final 5 minutes always planned like that? Did you guys have that ending always in mind, that that's how you want to sort of resolve the film, or did you make you know, tweaks further on in the process? What was just the thought process behind that? Like,
it's actually a great observation, because so the idea of him getting in the trunk was always planned like that, because, you know, basically the idea behind it is that they all get pumped up about this thing, and they kind of, you know, dream it big and become like an adventure, a fairy tale in their minds, driven by the kid. But then kind of actually doing it, you know, Camila has the reality shower in the end, that maybe that fairy tale approach doesn't work in real life, so she just tells him, you know, let's try like this. But talking about the actual, like, you know, the final shot, at the beginning it was originally planned in a different way, because like, you know, while we were writing, we were thinking of finishing, you know, with him running and eventually seeing them, you know, and meeting them, and actually we had this idea of him bringing a cup of coffee to Elvis, and you know, and then they would all like be happy and jump in the ocean together in a kind of a cheesy way. But then, like, while we were editing and while we were, you know, shooting the film, and sorry, while we were shooting, and then also while we were editing, we realized how powerful it could have been to just, you know, leave that feeling of him, because if you think about it, the important thing is that it's not much that they, you know, that they succeeded or not, but they decided to do it, you know, and that they decided to do it through the guidance of the little kid who, you know, with his kind of naive and pure mentality, guides all of them to do it. And so, you know, the idea of beginning the movie with him standing like still, waiting for an adult, you know, and ending it with him running by himself, deciding to just, you know, jump out of the train by himself, and having that individual, you know, choice. It's kind of, you know, summarized in a way the coming of age of this little kid that by himself, you know, being the smallest of the group, kind of, you know, guided them all and grew up doing it. So ending the movie like that was just, you know, so at a certain point became so natural in a way, you know, that we just felt that it was the right thing to do.
We have just time for one more question.
They had a question.
Okay.
From the very beginning.
Yeah.
I'll stand up. That works.
Yeah, perfect.
I was very struck just by your explanation of how you think this film fits exit audiences. But I was also very struck by the way you portrayed Elvis in this film.
I was wondering, to what extent did you do research or engage with that particular issue to have a fleshed out character in your film?
We actually did engage a lot with researching, and we know these places a lot because we again spent a lot of time there. But while
and it
preparing,
goes together.
Well,
Well, I spent a lot of time in those places as a kid.
really?
My summertime as well, and they go together, right?
Yeah.
There are summer holiday spots for families.
Exactly.
Who come back and every year, and then at the same time you'll see
Especially lately, right?
Camps
Lately,
growing,
after 2015, we were studying abroad and we came back, and so we saw this shift, this huge shift. Because growing up, the only difference was that, again, cigarettes are cheaper in Italy and medicines in France, right? And coming back, we saw this huge difference, and we saw people stuck there, and half of the population, the local population, trying to help, the other half hating on them and the situation, which, of course, it's hard to judge from outside. It's always impossible to judge either side from outside. So while preparing the movie, we actually went and spoke with people that work constantly there, trying to help. And we also met a lot of people who hate the situation and are fed up with the situation and would put very creepy signs on their bars or restrooms that really reminded us of like the 40s, right? And so it's really interesting to see what's going on and how all people cope with it. And lately, there's been movies that had dealt about this topic, and most of the times they're dramatic movies, and which are definitely a necessary thing. But on what we thought, also, well, two things. We decided to make it, let's say, lighter movie and more towards a comedy for two main reasons. The first being that we had the right to portray a history of a story of brutal realism, because I think if you, especially going there and talking to these people, you realize that unless you experience it yourself, it's very weird to just say, okay, this is the truth, so here's the truth, right? From an outside, privileged point of view. So that's why we decided to shift towards a fairy tale. You don't see a lot of migrants, like sometimes, it comes in waves, but sometimes you can see a lot of them stuck there. We decided to make this more of a fairy tale, shift away from the pure realism, and we applied that to the whole film, not only on the migrant character.
But I like it how you use those two ladies, talk about that
Yeah,
shooting incident.
exactly. But still, like, we see one migrant, and then you see one American, and then we see a girl and a boy, right? It seems like the beginning of a joke, and it's just because it's a fairy tale that kind of we try to embody it in a simple way, not wanting to be documentarily realistic, because we didn't feel we had the right, and also the other side of the choice of making a comedy came from the fact that, yes, we've seen a lot of dramas about it, and we think they are vital, and that's what people should be doing. But also what we noticed is that most of the time these movies have the consequence of creating a further border, because people that go to see them are usually people who already agree on what you're saying, and people that don't go to see them, and that don't agree, just don't go to see them, because they're like, I don't want this drama about about the migrant again, and so it's hard for these movies to actually make everybody really think, and we think that through comedy you can actually be more sneaky about it and get through emotions of everyone, because the premise is that you're gonna laugh, so you don't really care of the political implications of what you're watching. But then hopefully you don't come out with an answer, because we don't have an answer, but maybe you come up with a question that you didn't have when you enter the cinema, and that's very important for us.
Somebody also wanted to ask, this would be the last question, so we'll close it after this.
Were there any references that you guys put in this movie, like to any older films that you liked? Maybe
Yes.
when Elvis drops that tablet into water and it jizzles in the water, it's
Yeah.
like a taxi driver.
Yeah.
The scene.
So for sure, like being, our first feature, we had that, urge a little bit to say, let's put the citations of the cool directors we like, because we had that kind of, obviously now maybe growing up and realizing you do it less and less, but we had, the desire to tribute what, influenced us a lot. So probably the most cited movie is the 400 Blows, like in, the final run of the kid. And the shot when he has the turtleneck on his face. But as you said, Taxi Driver. Also, the thing that the character does, it's a reference to a Wes Anderson scene of the Royal Tenenbaum.
Okay.
When the guy jumps out of the window and says, "I know you, son of a bitch." It's like, but yeah, that's basically.
Also loved the Flower Seas music video. Yeah.
And the opening credits.
You also saw it like 5 times, right?
And also opening credits, they also have a certain 70s vibe, if I'm not wrong. Just the beginning, I think a few seconds that show before the movie starts.
Yeah, also those kind of aesthetics, with the titles and the credits for sure. Also, the title appearing like that glowing is definitely something you don't see lately, but it's another kind of fetish we have of all the movies that have their own graphics and designs and little details like that we love about, films in general.
Peter, also, it's been most wonderful watching the film and having this wonderful conversation with you. And I really hope that you come back to India very soon again. And
I hope so too.
all of you, please do, follow our page, Italian Culture Center page, and for more such events and more such screenings and interactions. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you.